Hi everyone and welcome to another video. This time I have a bunch of Dell OptiPlex 390 tower PCs. In the video I'll start by cleaning the machines as they are pretty dusty and then we'll disassemble them completely. While reassembling, I'll also upgrade the memory and add an SSD to them. Once all that is done, I will do some benchmarks as well. The Dell OptiPlex 390 was released back in 2011 and so is now over 10 years old. It originally came with a second generation Core i Sandy Bridge CPU, up to 8GB of RAM, and was bundled with Windows 7 at the time. As you can see on Dell's website back then, the target audience for this machine was undoubtedly office users. On an auction, I was able to buy 5 of these machines in a very good condition. On first view, they all have a Core i5 2400, 4GB of RAM and a 250GB hard disk. The other thing which you can notice immediately on the footage is the large amount of dust. So, as a start, I will open each of these machines and will use a compressor to blow most of the dust out. Luckily, the weather in Belgium was pretty good when I did all of this because, as you will see in the upcoming part, doing this inside is really not recommended. Even though the PCs didn't look that bad on the inside at first, you can see that there was a good amount of dust present all over the place. Here's some more satisfying footage on the other PCs. Alright, once most of the dust was cleared, I gave each of the towers also a good clean with a microfiber cloth. And after that, I removed any leftover stickers, including the plastic foil which is still there from the factory. Back inside and ready to start the disassembly/upgrade. I've got all the parts ready for the upgrade here, a 128GB SSD and 4GB of RAM for each of the computers I just cleaned. Let's have a look at one of these in some more detail before we start. The design is really nice in my opinion and especially timeless. Even after 10 years, nobody would tell that this is an old PC just by looking at it. Dell used this design for some time on different models as well, and I totally get why. On the front of the OptiPlex 390 we can see the power button, 2 slots for 5¼ devices, where one is occupied by a DVD drive. Then we also have audio and 2 USB connectors on the front. On the back of the machine we have the power connector on the power supply, 6 USB ports, network, HDMI, VGA and audio. The bottom right 2 USB ports seem to be blocked by parts of the I/O panel somehow. I can't imagine that this came like that from Dell, so hopefully that's not a bad sign. Opening up the case is easy with the handle on the side panel. Inside we can find a 265W power supply, CPU which is under the cooler, 2 memory slots, 5¼ drive base, and the drive cage with the 250GB hard disk and space for an additional one. Let's start our disassembly. First I will remove the SATA cables and power cables from the drives and the motherboard. Then we can remove the drives itself. First up is the hard disk. To remove the DVD drive, I need to get the front panel off first. Then it can be slided out by releasing that blue plastic latch. Now the rest of the cables connected to the motherboard, starting with the power connector, case fan, and the rest of the front panel connectors. This allows us to remove the 6 screws holding the board in place. And once these are removed, we can get the board out. As mentioned earlier, 4 GB of RAM was present. The final step is to get the CPU out, but to do so, we need to remove the CPU fan first, of course. That took a bit of force, mainly due to the thermal paste, which became more like thermal cement. Let me clean that off before we continue. That's a lot better, and so is the heatsink. Here's a closer look at the i5 2400, which can easily be removed from the socket. This CPU was the fastest officially supported CPU in the OptiPlex 390. But I did find out after some reading that an i7 2600 is working as well. That seems to be the real maximum people manage to get working. Same thing goes for the memory. Officially, Dell only claims support for up to 8 GB. But many people seem to have managed to upgrade successfully to 16 GB with two 8 GB modules at 1333 MHz max. Back to the board, where we can find the CPU socket, those two memory sockets I just mentioned, ATX and P4 power connectors, CPU and case fans, 4 SATA ports, which unfortunately are only SATA 2.0, 1 PCIe X16 and 3 X1 slots, internal speaker, which has an external connector as well, front LEDs, USB headers, front audio, intrusion detection, and finally the connector for the power switch. Time for the reassembly. Let's first have a look at what we're up for. We have the motherboard, CPU and cooler, SSD and the original hard disk, 2x4 GB of RAM, and the original DVD drive, which I will also upgrade to a writer. Let's start by putting back the CPU to the motherboard. Simply open the socket, make sure the CPU is aligned correctly, and then we can close the socket. Let me put some much needed fresh thermal paste, and then we can install the CPU fan and heatsink again. We shouldn't forget to connect it as well. And then we can install the 8 GB of RAM, 4 GB in each slot. That's it for the motherboard. Let's put it back in the case. But first, let me bend back those pieces on the I/O panel that were blocking 2 USB ports. Then I can just put the board in and fix it with the same screws. Now that's done, let me put back all case-related connectors. And then the ATX and P4 power connectors. Next up is the DVD writer. For the 5¼ drives, the case has a system which simply allows you to slide in the drive. For this to work, I need to move the screws from the original DVD drive to the new one. When inserting it, it just clicks in place and then we can connect it to power as well. The hard disk is the next one. Followed by the SSD. The SSD tightly fits above the hard drive as there is no other designated place for it in the case. As you can see, the power connector just fits as well, but I couldn't think of a better place without a special bracket. Last step is to connect the SATA connectors for all the drives. Then we can go ahead and put back the front panel. And close up the case. Here we have everything back together and connected to a screen, keyboard and mouse. Let's see if the machine shows any sign of life. Alright, we have lights on the case. And something on the screen. Let's press F12 for the boot menu. We can already see all the drives here, always good. After entering the BIOS setup in System Information, we can find our CPU as expected, and looks like the 8 GB of RAM is detected as well. As in the boot menu, the drives show up here too. One cool and handy feature of this PC, which I really like, are the diagnostic LEDs it has on the front. They are invisible during normal use, but can be seen during the power on self-test, as you might have noticed. These can be a real life and time saver when troubleshooting system issues. Seems like everything is working fine after reassembly and upgrades. Let me quickly install Windows 11 on the new SSD. As you might know, Windows 11 is unsupported on this rather old PC, but it's running pretty fine. In case you would be interested in knowing how to do this yourself, you can find a card here in the video with instructions. Once Windows is installed, I'm also installing all updates using Windows Update, including any missing drivers. Alright, after this reboot, all updates should be installed, so let's first double check if all drivers are present as well. We can do this easily by having a look in Device Manager. Everything looks good here, no issues or missing drivers. Let me open Explorer and check this PC. Here we can see the SSD, hard disk and DVD upgraded to a DVD writer. All as expected, that's good. About this PC shows us the same as in the BIOS, the i5-2400 as CPU and 8GB of RAM. We can also see here that Windows 11 indeed got updated to a newer version. Time for some basic benchmarking. Let me launch Geekbench 5 and run the CPU benchmark. $2,363, that's pretty much in line with my expectations and not bad at all for a 10-year-old machine. Compared to some of the other systems I tested recently, for example this Lenovo M91P, on which I did a video as well, we see similar results. That one has an i5-2500, which is slightly faster as we see in the score. In case you would be interested to see the potential for this Dell for gaming, do check out the video I did on the Lenovo, as the results should be very similar. Next up is disk performance. Let's start with the SSD. Around 200 MB per second, that's for sure good enough, but here we do notice the lack of SATA 3. The impact can be seen best if we compare this result to the earlier mentioned Lenovo M91P. The specifications and age are pretty much the same, but the Lenovo has two SATA 3 ports, and with the same SSD, this results in a better disk performance. For completeness, let me also test the original 250GB hard disk, which performs surprisingly well. Glad I decided to leave that one in next to the SSD. Another test we can do, which is relevant, is Browser Bench. Again, not much to say here. All is in line with the expectations and confirming that this decade-old computer is nowhere near slow for day-to-day use. Even stuff like watching YouTube in 4K doesn't seem to be an issue at all. With some minor upgrades like memory and installing an SSD, like I did in the video, I managed to give a second life to these 5 10-year-old PCs. Despite their age, they are still quick and responsive and definitely good enough as long as you're not expecting to play the latest games on them. Not much more I have to add here, so thanks a lot for watching. As always, if you have liked this video, please put a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out newer videos. Thanks again and hope to see you back here soon.